My name is Amy, but before we get started, I'm going to pray us in and then we'll dive on in. Okay. So, dear Lord, thank you for bringing us here today. Thank you for bringing everyone in here that you have made time for in their day to be able to worship with us and be able to dive into your word. And just let anything I say just be your words and just let me be your vessel. Pray all this in your name. Amen. Okay, so some of you probably have read this book of the Bible. I had not. So, full transparency, there's a funny story behind this message today. But, so it comes, let me get there, and then we'll start. From Malachi chapter 3, and I'm still scrolling. Okay, and it reads, I will send my messenger to you who will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to his temple, the messenger of the covenant, whom you desire will come, says the Lord Almighty. But who can endure the day of his coming? Who can stand as he appears? For he will be like a refiner's fire or like a launderer's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the Levites and refine them like gold and silver. Then the Lord will have the men bring offerings of righteousness. Okay, that's the only thing I'm reading straight word for word, guys. So you don't have to hear me study it anymore. Okay, so here's the story behind how I got this story, because I had never heard this, and we're really gonna harp on one of the verses that I really love, but we're gonna talk about all of it. So a few weeks ago, I was scrolling through Instagram, as we kind of tend to do. I came across a reel, and if you've heard it before, sorry, you just get to hear it again. And it talked about how this group of women were studying the book of Malachi, and how, they really got caught up. And I'm gonna get my Bible out, because I like my Bible version more than the one I copy and pasted. Sorry. But it talked about really harping on verse 3, and the verse that said, he sits as a refiner and a purifier of silver. And, it goes on to say how he will purify the Levites and he will refine them as gold and silver. And then they will bring offerings of righteousness to the Lord. They were hung up on this. So one of the women of the Bible study, was like, okay, well, I'll look into it and I'll report back next week. And she did that, and she went and basically watched a silver refiner, silversmith, if you may, refine silver. And she didn't tell him why, she wanted to do it. She just said, I just have a lot of genuine interest. She did, wasn't a lie. But while doing this, she's like, okay, so how long does it have to be in the fire for? And he's like, well, I have to sit with it the whole time. As it says, he sits as a refiner. And he's like, it has to be in the middle of the fire, at the highest point of the fire, which it was so interesting. But then, at the very end, she's like, okay, how do you know when it's pure? How do we know when the silver's done? And then he's like, oh, well, that one's easy, when I can see my image in it. And I'm just sitting here dumbfounded. I'm like, I just found this on Instagram. I'm just dumbfounded by this. And when I was deciding what to speak about, I'm like, oh, this is it. So we're speaking about sanctification. Don't be scared. Please don't walk out of the big word. Please. I would cry, and that'd be awful. So when I think about this, I think about, I was at Parkway Heights a few months ago, and Miss Susan had preached about this, and she completely changed how I saw sanctification. I'm going to use her illustration in a little while, but I want to kind of tell you my testimony a little bit about why sanctification is so important in my life, and just how it just changed how I saw my Christian walk. So if you don't know much about me, I have dyslexia and ADHD. So going through trying to read the Bible growing up, it was awful. It was this massive book of goodness and life and everything we need at the crux of our relationship for Christ. But yet I could not get through it. I'm looking at this book, I'm like, you say I'm fearfully and wonderfully made in your image, but yet you made the girl dyslexic and ADHD. How are we supposed to get past this, dude? And what I kind of brought out of it when I got through, and we'll talk about it more later, how kind of like I see it, and like you have to sit in that difficulty sometimes, and how he'll reveal things when you sit in it. But I went to ChatGPT, guys, and I was like, what Instagram said, like, is it true? Like, I'm not going to take Instagram's word, but like, I'll follow my sources, I'll do some Googling. I didn't just do ChatGPT, I don't just use that. And I found it very interesting that it pretty much summed up how I would have described sanctification and the story that I retold to you guys. So it says, silver refining is the process of purifying the silver to remove the impurities and to obtain a highly purified metal. Okay, now here's the part like actually listen to. If you weren't listening, that part. The process used depends on the form and the source of the silver. So then it goes into say, silver refining, and it was meant to be a simple design, but it is hard in practice. I found that so interesting because like I had to go, and it brings up silver refining today. And silver refining today is different than it would have been when the Bible was written. So you have to actually look at the actual context it would have been taken into. Nowadays, it's done with like electricity and all kind of cool stuff you can dive into yourself. But in this day and age, we're still using like silversmith refinery and having to use like molten ore and like all these things. So it's like, it was meant to be a simple process of like, you do this, you do this, you do this. But in reality, if that silver stays in that fire too long, without the silversmith sitting there with it, when he comes back, if it was there too long, it's damaged. So that's why the silversmith has to sit there. That's why it says that the one that who is to come has to sit as a refiner, because Jesus isn't going to leave and come back. And then he has his precious, wonderful being damaged, because then he sits as a refiner. So as Zoe said, when I said I need the whiteboard from downstairs, she's like, oh, you're for real. Yes, I was for real. But my girl came through and she brought it up for me anyway. So we're going to move it back so everyone can see it. So one of the things that I really kind of want to think about when I was talking about earlier, I would dig into the Bible, and this is exactly how I went. So, Don, can you see it? I'll flip it around so you can see it later. Okay, cool. Okay, so I thought about it like this. Like, here's little Amy. Okay, that one actually doesn't work, so JK, like, maybe my green will. That'd be really cool. My green does. There's a funny story about that later. Anyway, so here's little Amy, and here was my destination. Isn't like a little bullet point? Yeah. This is what we're going to call holiness. Or holy, because if I spell this, I'll get it wrong. Cool. I thought it was just like that. And I was sitting in Parkway Heights, and like Miss Susan bring her big board up there. Me and Alicia are looking at her, and she's like, she about to bring that board up there. She did. So here's my board. And this is how she described it. Like, we think it's a linear path, when in reality it is nowhere a linear path. Because holiness actually, and sorry, I should have like stopped and defined sanctification. It's the process to get to holiness. Because we're not holy. We are not Jesus, guys. I'm not Jesus. I don't know if you think you are. I'm sorry to break your heart. And this is what it really kind of looks like a lot more. Here's little Amy again. Little smiley face. I'll draw a little shirt and some shorts. My art skills. That's lovely, right? And we're going, and then we go down, and then we go up, and then we go in the middle, a little plateau, and then we go down, up, plateau, and holiness. Doesn't that look lovely? It looks like the Emerald City. That's why it was funny, because it was the green marker. Anyway, so that's what it actually looks like. However, sometimes our lovely little people, our lovely little Christians, sometimes can't even get here. Because I know I've been stuck in paths where I'm actually here. Here's little Amy. And instead of even getting up here, no, I'm just on repeat. I'm just like, oh, let me open the Bible. Okay, I got in Genesis, I got past that. Oop, and I don't think I get any further. Shut it, and I go about my regular life. I'm on repeat. I don't even get to the valley, because this is implying you got past the valley. Sometimes our people aren't getting past it. I don't know where you're at in your journey. I know I've been here.
I lived a lot of my life here, a lot of it, until it actually became aware that it's like, oh, I have people that want to help me get out of this. I have a community that wants to help me break this cycle of just doing the same thing over and over again and just coming back to the same position of not getting anywhere in my faith journey. So we may come back to this. I'm going to roll it over here for a second. I mean, if you guys want to watch, I'll bring it back for you to see it. It's pseudo relevant for a second. Okay, so back to over here. Hope you enjoyed the little illustration. So, also the repeat one, it's like exhausting, like, because you're not getting anywhere. It's like running in slow motion, like, you know, like in the movies, like when they're like freezing, it's like, and they get nowhere. But like, that to me, what the repeat one's like. So, but you know what? Actually, no, I do need my board back. JK, actually. You know what all of these have in common, though? It's really, anybody want to try? Anyway, no, okay, you guys are all smiling like I'm a goofball. I am a goofball. It's okay. Okay, they all said yes. Every one of them answered the door and answered the knock that Jesus had. But yet, after they got there, they couldn't figure it out. Well, this person, I mean, they eventually figured it out. A little rough journey, but they got there. But they didn't, it was hard. So one of the things that I thought was really cool about that is, to me, that reminds me of the soap. You know, we had talked about, I believe it's right, I don't have a pointer, I wish that'd be really cool. Okay, actually, oh, here we go, laundry soap. So like the laundry soap, you know, we have refiner's fire and then laundry soap. He doesn't write the Bible. Oh, you guys can't see that. Or can you? No, you can. Cool. Okay, so he doesn't put two in there for no reason. You know, like we have the refiner fire, but we also have the soap. So I did some digging. I did some investigating. I did some research. I'm a research girly. And laundry soap. So in my edition, it had Fuller's soap. I'm like, okay, well, what's so different about Fuller's soap? And it describes it almost as like bleach, because another version said it was bleach. Anyway, roundabout. But this is this is a type of soap that you normally would take like a cloth and wash it in that, and it would come out with a lot water. Like kind of how like we would bleach clothing and it would come out water now. That was like their version of that. So another word for this would be called justification. Right. See where I'm going there? Now let me define that one. So justification is going to be the act at which God moves in a willing person from the state of injustification to the state of grace or justified. So to me, that would be like before here. Like that's before you ever get there. That's my whiteboard. So that's before you ever get here. But as soon as we answer the knock, you know, like we accept God into our heart and we're like, yes, we're going to rock and roll with Jesus. That's when we start the process of actually starting sanctification. So I thought that was really interesting how we have the soap, but we also have the refiner's fire. I didn't figure out why the soap comes after. If you know, please let me know. I couldn't figure it out. Figure there's a reason why, but I couldn't figure it out. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, so sanctification process starts when we say yes. So I want to really kind of take in that the fact that, you know, Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament. This was written pre-Jesus. Like, it's not coming yet. We're still prophesying that he's going to come. And the Fuller's soap would have been like them prophesying that. Like, I think it's really hard when we're reading the Old Testament to take a step back and remember, oh yeah, they don't have that yet. Like, they don't get to have their sins forgiven yet. So like, they aren't living in the state of, oh, you know, I have a Savior that came and has saved me. They're still waiting on that. They're in the waiting period. That's wild. We didn't have to live that. Thanks be to God. But, so I was thinking of a Bible story for us to kind of process and think through that would really just, you know, nail home my wonderful Emerald City analogy. And I was like, oh my goodness, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. I was like, you know, he sat in the fire with them. Like, this is great. And then I'm like, actually, it's not. It's not, because they didn't really mess up. You know, like they had their faith and they saw it through till the end. And, you know, like it worked out, but, you know, they didn't stumble. I was like, I need someone that stumbled, man. And Peter, my dude Peter, he was the rock, but he stumbled. He stumbled. He did. So I would call this the Peter refining. So we look at Matthew 14, 22 through 31. We're going to spend a little time here. It wasn't the main scripture that we're basing this off of, but it's a good one. So to summarize, it is where Jesus walked on water. But we're going to look at it a little differently. For some reason, when I did Sunday school, I don't know if it was like the little kid illustrations, I thought we had a flat sea and that we had a sun. That wasn't the case. That was not. I was like delusional, I guess. I don't know. I guess I didn't look at my like little Sunday school analogies. I don't know. So I'm going to read from it and then we're going to go back so you guys can just see like an overview. So starting in 22, immediately he told his disciples to get up. Actually, I'm going to read from this one. No, it's fine. Okay. Immediately he told his disciples to get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. And after he dismissed the crowd, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was long away from the land, beaten by the waves, for there was wind against them. And it was in the 4th hour of the night that he came to them, walking on the sea. But then the disciples saw him walking on the sea, and they were terrified. And they said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus said to them, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink out, he cried, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Okay, so I'm going to go back up. And so this isn't IBS, I promise, but we're going to go about like the IBS type of way. Okay, so again, I didn't realize we had wind and waves, not gonna lie, but that's okay because we now know. So I'm like creating this like illustration in my mind. Like we got this little boat and like, okay, also I did some Googling because I'm a Googling and ChatGPT lady, a little investigator. And the 4th hour of the night, it is dark. It is not daytime. It is not. So also Matthew wrote this book. I find it very hilarious, to be quite frank, that he felt the need to tell us the time because they only tell us the time very few times in the Bible. So just saying, I think he was trying to say like we had valid reason to think that Jesus was a ghost. I promise, like it wasn't just like we weren't looking. Anyway, a little fun for you. But so when Peter stepped out of the boat, remember, wind, waves. Peter's a fisherman. He was a fisherman before he went and followed Jesus. So I would think he's a little used to this at this point. You know, like he was raised raised to fish. I don't think he had never been out in those conditions before, me personally. Matthew, on the other hand, is probably seasick at this point. He was a tax collector, but that's irrelevant for poor little Matthew. So when Peter stepped out of the boat, to me, okay, if I'm about to step out on the water, I have faith when I'm stepping out. But then the conditions changed because he went from, okay, I got my feet on like a pretty solid, decently solid ground to, okay, now like it's like actually like the texture has changed, like the density has changed. And it's like, that's when it hit. Because he was fine. Like he did not sink immediately, guys. Like he was there for a second on the water walking. But then he doubted. And so many people are so harsh on Peter. When it's like, I believe it was in the Epic of Eden. It's like when we start to see ourselves in the disciples, and when we start to see ourselves in the things that, different people in the Bible have messed up, that's when you really kind of start to grow. Because I don't know about you guys, but I probably would have taken the apple, just saying, in the garden. Probably, because we're human. But Peter is in his refining. because he stepped out in faith, but then he went here. He doubted. However, he didn't fail. That's the big difference here. Peter didn't do this and say, actually, okay, I'm going back to my fishing. I'm out. Peace out. And even when he did try to go back fishing, he didn't stay there. I wish I had an even bigger dip. This one's not. So like if that one went down here, that would be like when he went back fishing, like after Jesus's like death, like that would be there. But anyway, it's like the difference is he stumbled. He didn't fail. So often I feel like in our Christian journey and in our walk with God, we feel like we fail. You know, like little Amy, when she was growing up and she was trying to read the Bible. When I tell you guys, like I carry legit like grief of myself because I'm like, I can't do it. I've run into a wall so many times, like I'm just an awful Christian. However, Jesus and God can use every page you read. He's going to use every single prayer you've prayed. You know, in one season where maybe I struggled, that was the season I learned to pray. And that was the season I learned to depend on God. However, I might not have gotten through the New Testament that year. I did learn how to cry out and how to pray before I got in those situations. So it's not like I always stayed stuck here sometimes. Sometimes, you know, maybe I had a little wiggle in it. I might not have been completely flat-toed. But one of the things Miss Susan said I really loved, that it was like, you know, so often we're trying to get over here. We're trying to get to holiness. And by just looking there, you know, sometimes, she didn't say this part, but I feel like sometimes we just like honestly like trip and we fall. And it's like in reality, when we look here on our little small victories, you know, I got through, guys, I did read that out to you guys. Like that would have been way worse if I was little, guys. Like it was awful. Like you would have been like leaving. It would have taken so long. It's like you have to look at your little victories in life. So it's like, you know, even when you're there, when you're at a plateau and you're like, what else do I have to learn about the Bible? There's always something more. Even if you've gotten all the way through, trust me, there's always something more. And then you're hit with the, new realization. You have to look at your small wins and your big wins. Because if you're looking here, that's like trying to get to your marathon and you never ran your first mile. Like you have to start with at least running 1 or 3 miles before you can get to the 26 miles. So I like that part really of her analogy. So to me, Jesus was with him in his refining the whole entire time. He was right there. You know, it says immediately he reached out. Because to me, if you don't know anything about physics and density, things sink. They are less dense. If you are more dense, you float. Anyway, I messed that up. Anyway, to me, he did not sink. He dropped. In my mind, like Peter was like, slowly falling like in the movies. He like went boom. And that's why he said he had to reach out his hand. I'm imagining him like pulling him out from the water, not him just like, you know, like your feet are under. Like I'm imagining like his head's under at this point. That's just me though. But you know, I feel like we all have our head almost under sometimes. So it's like, where are you in your walk? Are you at the point of justification? Right here, you know, you're beginning. Yay! But if you're just right here, it's really hard to get to here if you have no community. Because when you just start your justification and you've said yes and you're about to start your sanctification, you don't have really a foundation yet. I mean, you don't have that solid ground. I mean, you're standing on the water that Peter was on. So when you're there and you don't have a community and you don't have a church family, you might end up here. So one thing I want you guys to take away is always being in a community. Whether that is a Bible study or that is a Wesley. If you're in the Wesley, don't just come and say hi. You need to dig in, because if you're not digging in, then you may end up here or just hanging out here in limbo a little while. But yeah, if you are in your sanctification journey, I would encourage you to figure out where you are there. Because we're all in different points there. My sanctification journey looks different from all y'all's. Every single one of you guys. No sanctification journey is going to look different, going to look the same. But yeah, And it's not a straight line, contrary to many beliefs. And where are you being refined at? Where is he trying to get impurities out of your life? Because we all have them. Because we're striving to be holiness and we're trying to be there. But it takes a long time. And to me, it's something you always strive to get there, because we can be like Jesus, but we aren't Jesus. That's why we had to have the justification. Let me get that definition again, because it was a good definition. Actually, I might not be able to find it. Haha. When the act of God moves in a willing person to state the sin and just to save them in the state of grace and just. Okay, let me read that again. In the act in which God moves in a willing person from the state of sin to the state of grace. So, kind of like that sink in. Like you went from the state of sin to the state of grace. So, justification can't exist if we're ever fully holy. So, I hate to break it to you if you ever thought you were going to get there. I'm sorry. But we can strive to get there. And we can strive to be like Jesus. And it's a fun little path that I hope you guys all walk with each other. And yeah, so I really want you to contemplate where you are at, because I don't know, this changed how I completely saw my Christian walk, honestly. It's like crazy. I'd love to tell you more about it or answer any questions, but that is all I have for you humble peoples. So yeah, I'm out. Zoe. Here's the pictures.